All right, today we're going to be covering Django, doing kind of like a Django intro. This will be pretty fun. We've been doing our assignments in Flask thus far, and Flask is pretty minimal, pretty bare bones. Django is a bit more full-fledged. It's got some extra features that Flask doesn't necessarily have out of the box, but Flask is a little bit more plug and, like you can plug things into it. Okay. So let's explore how we can create a new Django project. I'll open up a new window here. And the first thing that we generally always want to do when we're working with some new assignment or a new project or whatever is usually want to activate our environment. Okay, so get the environment going. However, before we even get there, we're going to set up a new environment for Django. Okay, so let's go in here. I've got my environments somewhere in here. Python environments. And I already have a Django environment, but we're going to kind of assume that you guys are starting from scratch. You don't yet have this environment. So let me remove that. Django. Okay. I'll clear that out. So let's create a new environment. Anyone want to tell me the commands for that? Does anyone remember?
I have a PC.
Oh, true. That's true. All right. If no one remembers, we're going to do Python 3, and then we're going to do -m venv for our virtual environment, and then we need to name the environment. Okay, so now it's created. We'll see it in there. Now we have a Django environment. So the first thing that we want to do once we've activated that environment, which I haven't done yet, is we're actually going to want to install Django so that we can use it inside that environment. All right, so let's activate it. That's going to be source Django line activate. Okay, we can see that my environment's activated. That's good. So how do we install things when we're in Python, when we're installing dependencies? Pip install, and then the name of that specific package, right? So let's do that. Pip install. And then we're installing a specific version of Django. And this is potentially going to change in the future, but we're installing 1.10 on that. So the way that we specify that is with the double equal sign. And then we'll say the number of the version. Okay. Collecting Django equals 1.10. Okay, and it looks like that was in the cache on the remote. Okay, so I'm using pip version 19.03. However, I have this newer version available, so I can just run this command here: pip install upgrade pip. Oops. Cool. So everything's good to go. Our environment is activated. We've installed what we need inside the environment. And now what we want to do is actually create, basically just create a little Hello Django type project, something like that. All right. Django has this thing called a CLI. Is anyone familiar with what that means? Has anyone heard of a CLI before? No? Okay. So what this means is like a command line interface. And what that allows us to do is do a number of different things with our projects straight from the command line. So we don't need to go in and sort of create all of these folder structures ourselves. We can just run some commands and it's going to build that structure for us. So it's pretty nice. So the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to go to a different folder here because I'm still in my environments folder. I'll just go to lectures. Okay. And I'm gonna say Django admin. So Django-admin, that's how we start using the CLI. And then I'm gonna say start project. And then I'm just gonna pass in the name of the project that I want. So we'll call it Hello Django. Okay. And now if I ls in here, actually let me do it as a list. You'll see there we have a Hello Django folder right now. So we're going to open up that folder and take a look at what the command line interface has done for us. And then we'll start working with it a little bit.
Can you go back to the command once more that you just entered the Django?
Oh, sure, yeah. So that was the command right there. So Django -admin start project to create a new project, and then you're going to just give it a name of the project that you want. Okay. So now I want to actually open that up. So I'm just going to go code hello Django. Gives me a new window here. But lo and behold, my my environment's not activated in here, right? So I got to do it again. There's probably a better way of doing this, but anyway, I'm just going to say source and then up a couple levels into my environments, Django, and activate. Alright, so let's get it activated again. And then one thing I want to show you guys is that we've created a, or actually I haven't created, but one of our previous instructors has created this Django cheat sheet. I've got it linked here in our spreadsheet, and we'll kind of follow along with that step by step, because setting up a Django project is a little bit more involved than it was setting up a Flask project. Okay, so let me click this guy. Oops. Bring this over here. Alright, so let's talk about what we've done so far. We've activated our Django virtual environment. Try to make this a little bigger. We've CD'd into where we wanted our project, right? And then we ran this command, Django admin start project, and then we gave it a project name. So wherever you guys see these double curly braces like this, you're going to actually fill in your own information, because I don't know what your specific project name is going to be. It depends on the assignment. So this kind of looks familiar to you guys, right? Double curly braces. What does that do inside our templates? Output something, right? Yeah, it's like we're sort of, this is something that needs to be replaced, okay? All right, now once we've done that, we're going to CD into the project folder that you just created, and we're going to make sure that we can see the manage.py file. So here inside my folder, I have my manage.py right up in there. And notice this is kind of one of the interesting things about Django. We have a nested folder with the exact same name as the project. Okay, so we'll have Hello Django as the root folder, but then inside that you're going to have another Hello Django. So it could be confusing, like at least the first couple times you see it. Alright, so we do have our manage.py, so we're good there. And what we want to do is we want to make a directory called apps. And Django has this concept of apps where we can have multiple applications inside one project. Okay, so we're going to create a folder called apps where we'll put our oh, there's some activity up here. Where we'll put our apps. And really, for the projects you guys are going to be making, you'll really only be having one app each time. But nevertheless, it's good practice to do it this way. So here we are, and what we want to do is make dir apps. Okay, and then that just made an apps directory. Let's explore this real quick. So inside the Hello Django folder, we have dunder init .py, we have settings, we have URLs, and we have WSGI, which we won't really touch for the most part, at least not at this point. Okay, and then so if we keep following along with the cheat sheet, we want to create a dunder init dunder.py file inside the apps folder. Now on Mac, this step doesn't seem to be critical. However, I have noticed with people who are on PC that if they don't create that init.py in the apps folder, they might run into trouble there. So let's just do it. So we want to go inside the apps folder, and then we want to we can do touch if we're at the command line. We could say touch dunder init dunder.py, and that will create the file for us. So there it is. Good to go. All right. Let's keep moving. And then from within apps, what we want to do is we want to actually create our main app that we're going to be using. And the name of this is kind of up to you. Notice here you guys are going to be able to fill in the name of your main app. I usually call mine main. That's not critical. You can kind of find your own thing that you like. So the command that we're going to run is we're going to say Python, and then we need to go up one level because notice my manage.py is up here at the root of the project because I want to call this file, and then I want to actually start an app. So I'm going to go ... to go up one folder level, and then I'm going to say manage.py. And then the command that we want to do is start app, and then we're going to give it a name. Okay? So notice how it's created an app for me over here because I was inside my apps folder. So if I look inside here, we've got a number of different things. We've got an admin file and apps.py. We also have models and views. The main things that you guys are going to be using as we go forward are these guys. So we'll be using the migrations. We're going to be using models.py and views.py. Those are the main things. Okay. So if we go back to the cheat sheet here, we've done all this stuff. So we got down here. So the cheat sheet is telling us to open the top level project folder so that we can see the whole structure. We basically have that already opened up, right? And then we want to add our app to the installed apps in your settings.py file. And then as the cheat sheet mentions here, don't forget a comma like me. Notice what data structure is this? Yeah, what do we call that in Python? A list. So if we don't have a comma there, you're going to have some breakage of your app, and then it could be hard to debug, potentially. So just make sure that you put a comma in there. Let's do that. So inside our settings, and I'm going to collapse this folder right here, inside of our settings, which is actually inside our Hello Django folder. So this is kind of the confusing part. Again, the root folder is called Hello Django, and then there's this other Hello Django folder that was created inside that. Inside this inner folder is where our settings.py is. And that's where we need to add our application. So I'll open that up, and then we want to go, oops, not optimized. Okay. So if I search for installed apps, it's down here, and by default it already has a number of different apps installed for us. Okay, so admin, auth, content types, and so forth. You just need to add your particular app to this array right here. Okay, and the way that we reference that is using dot notation. So I need to specify that I'm going into the apps directory, And then the app, what did we call the app? You guys remember? Main. Okay, so I'm just going to say apps.main. And then don't forget your comma. Very important. All right. So I think we're pretty good there. Anything else we need to do? So the main thing that we need to do is we have to take care of our URLs for our projects. Okay? And in Django, we have kind of like a couple different places we need to look at the URLs. We need to look at the root level, so the main project level, to route the URLs to a specific application. Okay, and if I only have one application in my project, that's really only one step. Okay, so let's open up the main URLs file down here. So inside my Hello Django, I have this urls.py file, and it's already including some different things. So we're importing some stuff. We're importing this thing called URL, which allows me to specify a URL pattern right there. And then we're also importing admin, but we're not really going to use admin, so I'm just going to comment that guy out. Let's dump that. And then rather than URL, I'm going to, in addition to URL, what we want to bring in is this include function. Okay. So I want to bring in include from Django. And then, why am I still getting a squiggly on this, even though I commented it? Oh, okay. Sometimes it requires you to save things before the red squigglies go away, so that's all that was happening there. So what we need to do is we need to route our main application. So if I'm just trying to route the index level of my app to my main app, I'm going to need to send it there. So when we hit the root route of the application, send it to my main app. So let's do that. So inside the URL patterns, we have to use this thing called regex. Has anyone heard of that before?
The registry.
No, not the registry. Anyone else? It stands for regular expression. That's what that means. So unfortunately, with Django routing, we have to use it a little bit, but it's actually not such a bad thing to get familiar with, because sometimes regex can come in handy if you're trying to do some string replacement type of operations. Say we wanted to do something where we had a set of first names separated by a space and then last names, something like that. And then I wanted to turn that into a list of names with last name, comma, first name. With regex, that would be pretty trivial. Imagine trying to do that by hand. So regex can do some really nice things for us. You can look into it a little bit on your own time too, but basically what you mainly need to know here is that this caret sign means that is the start of the pattern that we're looking for. And then we also might have a dollar sign at the end of it to say that this is the end of the string that I'm looking for. Okay? So what we're saying here is that a string starting with nothing, so basically like the index route of the whole project, I want to include my apps, actually just main.urls. Okay. Is this going to work as it is, though? Can you guys see any problems with this? So inside my main app, do I have a urls.py yet? No, right? I don't even have one. So I'm going to have to create one so that we can actually have routes for the app itself. All right, so let's create that. Inside here, we're going to create a urls.py. So this is sort of the key thing that you guys need to understand is that the project itself has its own urls.py. And again, that was inside the Hello Django folder. And then each individual app has its own urls.py as well. Okay. So we're going to need some of the same stuff that we were using here in the main urls.py, which is that we need to import URL. Okay? And then we need to specify a list of URL patterns to match for. So if I go here inside the new urls.py that I just created, I can say URL patterns equals. So again, it's going to be a list. And then for each item in my list, I'm just going to specify what the pattern is that I want to match for. Okay. So if I'm trying to match for the index route, what that's going to look like is just going to be the hat and then the $sign. And this is going to look kind of weird. Basically, that's just saying I just want an empty string. I don't want anything in my URL because that's the root route of the application. And then what do you guys think might happen in the second argument of this URL function, if you had to guess? So I've specified a URL that I'm interested in, and then what else would I need to pass into that? What I want to do with it. So if a user lands on this URL, what do I want to have happen? Okay, so it's basically like my handling of that specific URL. Okay, so we have a function, or we have a file that will actually handle all of our views. So these are called views in Django. And this is where we will create our different URL handlers. We're going to create different functions to deal with different particular URLs. Then inside the URLs file, we're going to import these guys so that we can use them in there. All right. So let's just create a, and we can also import, I believe it's HTTP response. Oops. This would be if we didn't have any templates yet and we just wanted to send back a word to the client, something like that. So let's create just an index function that can handle that index route. So let's just call it def index. And then in Django, for all of our functions that handle a route, we also need to take in the request object. Okay, so let's do that. We'll take in the request. And then I'm going to return an HTTP response saying hello from Django. And I'm pretty pumped about it, so I'm putting an exclamation point. Right? Now, inside our urls.py, what I can do is I can actually import. So I can say from dot, which means the same level that I'm at, I can import views. And then these are coming from these views right there, right? Okay. So here, inside here, what I want to do is just reference when I hit this route, I want what function to run. Which one did we just create? Yeah, but so we're bringing in all the views, but what function inside views did I create for this route? I'll show you again. It's just index. So we just created an index function. So let's call that one. So we'll go views.index. Okay. So we should have one route handled at this point. Let's double check the cheat sheet and make sure that we did everything. So this was us handling the main root level URL situation. We did include, specified apps, and then the name of the app, and then .urls, right? Actually, I need to add apps to this. So that's where kind of the cheat sheet will come in handy. At least for the first few times you guys create projects, you may notice you're forgetting a little step or something, and that'll help you there. So here, we created the URLs file within our specific app, right? We did that. And then we have to add the proper statements to that. So we were doing the same thing. From the level that we were at, we're importing the views. And then this is exactly what we did, right? So we set an empty string, and we're saying we want the views.index to handle that. Then finally down here, we did the exact same thing. We just imported HTTP response right here from Django.shortcuts, and then we're just returning back a string, basically saying something. That's it. No templating, anything for right now. Okay, let's actually try to get this thing running. So we want to go back to our command line here, and I'll just clear this out. And again, we want to use our command line to start the server. So I'm going to say Python, and then actually let me get out of my apps folder here. So I'll just cd back to the root of the project. I'll say Python manage.py, because that's the file that gives us access to some of the things that we want to be doing. And we'll say run server. Okay, so notice how it's telling me here that I had some unapplied migrations. This is for your database, but you guys don't need to worry about that just yet. It's just a warning. Not going to stop the app from working. And then down here, it's telling us we have it running at localhost, and the port number is 8000 on this one by default. Okay, so let's just go test it out. Localhost 8000. All right. Whew. I don't know about you guys, but that felt pretty good getting through all that, because it's a multi-step process, right? It wasn't just like Flask, like app.run, we're done, one file. There's a lot more involved. Okay, but we got something on screen, so that's pretty nice. Let's cover how we can make things a little more interesting, because this is not generally the way that we want to be sending back our responses. How do we like to work with our responses? What's a more workable solution for that? What are we doing in Flask? Were we just sending back a string like this? Yeah, we were rendering template, right? So in Flask, we were bringing that function render_template and doing it that way. So what do you know? Django has something similar. We also have a render function that we can use, which will make our lives a lot better. So let's take a look at that. Here inside of our views file, by default, when it creates a views.py for us, it was automatically bringing in this render function. So that's kind of nice. I don't even need to think to myself, like, oh, where's this coming from? Django.shortcuts. Because the CLI, again, did that work for us when we created that new app. All right? And where we want to put that, this part can be kind of complicated or confusing at first, is that we want to create a templates folder just like we did with Flask. So here we'll say templates, and then within that, Did I just create a file? Whoops. Let me delete this. Okay, I meant to create a folder, but we want to create a folder called templates. And then within the templates folder, we want to create another folder with the name of our app. Okay, and you guys are probably going to be asking yourselves why. I know I was when I first saw this. It didn't really make a lot of sense. But I'll explain it in a second. So we want to create a subfolder here called main. And then within that subfolder, we can actually create the template, the template files that we want. So I could just create index.html right there, drop some boilerplate in there, and then down here, let's just say hello from Django template. Okay, and notice how our server is always going to be restarting for us. So just like it was in Flask, whenever we make changes, it's restarting. So that makes things very nice for us. It's running in development mode. So the reason why we have these guys structured this way is because remember that a Django project can have multiple applications. So what would happen is that when Django runs through and does its thing and tries to determine what template to render, if we don't put it into kind of like a nested folder structure like that, we might run into a problem where we have two index.htmls. And which one's it going to render in that case? It should be the first one that comes across. Okay, so I might be meaning to render my index.html for my main app, but if I have another app, I don't know, like a user's app, something like that, and they both have an index.html, it's just going to render out the first one that it finds. But instead, if I could say main/index.html, then it can kind of differentiate there. Okay. So inside our views here, we've got our render function. I'm going to get rid of this HTTP response. Instead, we're going to render a template. And when we render a template, we also have to pass in the request itself. Then I'm going to say, what is the name of my template? So that one was going to be main, and then /index.html. Okay. So I saved it, it restarted, so that's all good. Let's do this. Okay. Now we're actually rendering a template, so that's pretty cool. We've got something that we can work with that we know and love, HTML. The templating in Django, at least in the version that we're using here, the 1.10, is not Jinja 2. It has its own templating, so it's slightly different, but largely the same. Okay, I believe the versions of Django 2 point something and beyond, those are all using Jinja. All right. So some of the things that are still the same, though, are the double mustache tags. Also doing control structures are largely similar as well. So let's just drop something in our template. We're going to create a little form. And this way we can kind of explore how would we deal with a form request. Okay? So let's create a form. And then our action is going to be, so let's just say we're taking in, I don't know, a person again, because we like doing that. So our action is going to be where we want this request to be sent. So let's just say, let me close this out. We'll just send it to process or something like that. It's nice and generic. And what's our method? Yeah, we'll do a post method. All right, and then inside there, I'm just going to do an input group. We'll say first name. Okay.
Syntax-wise in Django, do you not have to use like the brackets and
You mean curly braces?
for the post? Does it matter on the post part where we write post? Do we not have to use brackets there?
No, you wouldn't need any braces, unless I guess if you were trying to fill this in dynamically,
Okay.
like for something that you're passing to the template. In that case, you'd use the double curlies. Yeah, double mustache. So let's do last name here. Okay, and then I'll have just a little button to submit this guy. All right, so every time we create a form, which we have now, what do we always have to have in our back end for our application? What are we going to need now that I've created this form that's going to... Wow, can you guys even see the inputs? That's so weird. I can see them on my screen, but when I'm looking up here, it's like they're not even there.
I was going to say we need some inputs first.
I'm telling you guys, they're there. You have to believe me. Something about the whiteness of the screen. Okay, so we've created a form. What else do we need to have now that we have that form? So the process is always the same. Yes.
Don't you in the forgetting the name of it, but back on your Python file, don't you have to call the method? And
Yeah,
also
look-
note the post.
Let's back up even further a little bit. So what's the very first thing that we need to do, because we've got a form that's going to post to some route, right?
You want to store the information?
Well, before we even do that,
Name it, right?
what's that?
Give it names. Session.
Well, I gave it a name because I just did /process, right? Like that's the route that this form is going to send to.
No, like the field, so you can call them for the backend.
Well, yeah, I named those too. So if you look here in the code, see the name here is the first name, name is the last name.
Turn it into a session.
Session. Well, we're going to do session today. We're just going to handle like a post submission, just sort of like see what it looks like in the back end, right? But do I have a route yet for this form? No, right? I need to actually create a route at process so that I can handle this. All right. So let's start there. That means that we need to go back to the urls.py file. I'm going to close this one. Close settings because we're done with that. And then in urls.py, I'm going to add another URL pattern that I'm interested in. So let's say URL R, and then again, we're going to start the pattern with process, and then I'm going to end the pattern right there. Okay, so that's the whole URL pattern that I'm looking for. Now, we'll create a views.process. Uh-oh, what happened here? See the message up there? Have we created that function yet? No, so we're getting a little bit of friendly help here saying that that function doesn't exist. So we need to actually make it. All right, and if we go back to our views file, we can create it in here. So we'll say def process, and then again, we always need to take in the request. And then I'm just going to print out whatever came in through the... Actually, there are a couple things that we can do here, if you like. We can check to see what the method of the request was. So let's do that. Let's print request.method, and then let's also print request.post. Okay, so that'll look a little bit different than what we were doing in Flask. What were we doing in Flask to get the data from the form?
After you had the name of the route, then you would do methods after the...
True, but how are we referencing the actual data from the form inside of our function?
Request
render template?
It was request.form, right? So here we're going to be using request.post. This is the post data that came from the form. All right. And then just like we've been doing with Flask, we're going to bring up a redirect function, because again, we don't have to write this. This is something that comes with the framework. And then we're just going to return a redirect to the index route. Okay. Now we're going to get an error when we try to submit this form. I'm just warning you ahead of time, but so don't be alarmed. But let's give it a shot. So here, if I enter in just okay. So you see what we're getting up here? CSRF verification failed. Request aborted. So have you guys ever heard this term before? I know there's a lot of jargon here. CSRF. No, right? So what that stands for is cross-site request forgery. Meaning that I could potentially try to send a request to a different site that didn't want me to send requests to it. Okay? So what Django has is this thing called a token, which is essentially trying to determine that if you have this token, the request is actually coming from the website itself. Now that's not always true, because I can obviously go to a site, go pick up that token or find out what that token is, and then I can start sending requests to it because now I have the token. It's just kind of a way to sort of put another roadblock in the way of sending requests that we don't want to be sent. Okay? So it's just something that I need to include in my template and send it along with the form data when I'm submitting it. So here's how we do it. Inside my template, I actually have a little VS Code snippet that I wrote for this. If I just type in CSRF tab, it will give it to me. Okay? Now you might be thinking, why are we using just the % rather than the double mustache tags? And the reason why is because this isn't just going to output one string in the template. It's actually going to create a whole new input inside of our form that we have no control over. So Django is going to put that whole thing in there for us. So if I save this, let's go back to the page and let's look at what that token looks like. I'll refresh and then we'll view the page source. I'm going to blow this up so you guys can see it a little bit better. So it created this entire input for us. It's a type hidden. What does the type hidden mean? Have you guys seen this yet before? Type hidden.
Is it input?
Yes, this is an input of type hidden. So what does the type hidden mean?
Means you can't see it.
It's just not visible on the page. Yeah, but it is there. And you can see the name of this is CSRF middleware token. And then we've got this really long string here that's going to be sent to our backend every time we submit the form. And Django requires that. So if you try to submit the form without the CSRF token, you're going to get the error that we just landed on. All right? So that'll be a clue to you. Okay, I just need to put the token inside the form, and then I'm good. All right. So let's close that. Excuse me. Oh, maybe you guys can see the inputs now when I'm highlight or when I'm focused on it.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Since you can't see the input that's hidden, then what do you do with it? Like, what purpose does it serve?
You're not doing anything with it, but Django is using it to essentially validate that this request did in fact come from the website. Okay. But yeah, other than just putting it inside your form, you're not going to need to worry about it in any other way, shape, or form. All right. So let's put in some data here. Submit the form, and of course we get right back to where we were because we were returning a redirect on that. So let's look down here. When I printed my my information, so the first thing that I printed was the request.method. So that's post. And then the other thing that I printed was the form data, which is down here. So notice how the form data is a query dictionary, and it has all of the things that came through the form. So even the CSRF middleware token is part of that dictionary. And then we also have the first name and the last name that I provided. Okay? So if I wanted to restrict this, if I wanted to restrict this to be only post requests, I could do something with request.method. So I could say if, I could say something like if request.method was not post, then just return a redirect and don't even do anything. So let's try that real quick. If I say here, oops, if request.method does not equal post, then let's just return the redirect. Okay. And then I'll get rid of this down here, so we still have our post data if we get this far. Okay. So let's try hitting the route as a GET request. What do you think will happen then? So if I just go /process, what's going to happen? And by the way, what type of request is this if I just type up the address in the address bar there? It's a GET request. Yeah, so what's going to happen when I make this GET request?
It's going to redirect.
Okay, but is it going to print in the terminal? No, because it's not a post request, right? So let's look at our terminal, make sure everything's good. So this is the last thing that we had, right? If I go here, I don't have any new printing that happened here, right? So I hit this route, a GET request to the process route, but I didn't print anything out because it was not a post request. And then if I come back and I make a post request again, now we'll actually have something printed in there. It's a little bit hard to see here, but we have the query dictionary printed out. So that's it, guys. Hello, Django. Your first experience with Django. Any questions on what we did here? Does it seem intimidating setting up a Django project?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally understandable. And so that's why that cheat sheet that I linked in the spreadsheet will help you guys out step by step with the process. Okay? Any other questions before I dismiss you? Yeah, I'm sure they'll come up, no doubt. All right, so yeah, go ahead and get cracking on the assignments. No problem.